Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Model Kit Review. In today's fun review video, we'll be looking at the Tamiya 148 scale Dornier Do335A Pfiel, or Aero. This kit was originally released in 2000. It is Tamiya part number 61074. This kit was very well received when it was initially released in 2000, and it effectively put the much older monogram kit out to pasture with its much better fit and engineering and details. In this review, we'll be looking at the kit instructions, and I'll go over any problem areas to watch out for in those. I'll also show any aftermarket items that I'm using on this build. We'll look at the detail found on the smaller parts in the kit. That includes the cockpit parts and the landing gear. I'll also include some photos of the actual aircraft to use as a reference if you're building this kit. We'll look at the clear parts that are included with the kit, and we'll talk about the clarity and the fit of those. We'll look at the surface detailing found on the exterior of the kit, and we'll also talk about the fit of the major parts in this kit. We'll look at the color and marking guides. We'll talk about the marking options that are provided with this kit, and we'll talk about the quality of the decals themselves. And in the end, I'll give my conclusions. By all accounts, this is a very nice kit, but there are some areas that could use improvement, and we'll go over those in this review. A brief history of the Do335. The Dornier Do335 Pfeil, or Aero, was one of the most unusual fighters of the Third Reich. This multi-purpose aircraft was planned to be the Luftwaffe's next weapon in the skies over Europe. Its most prominent feature was the unconventional layout of its dual engines. These engines were both housed in the fuselage, one in the nose of the aircraft and the other one in the rear fuselage of the aircraft, and it was very unique in having propellers at both the front and rear of the aircraft and a puller-pusher arrangement. Two 1,750 horsepower Daimler-Benz DB603 engines allowed for a top speed of 760 kilometers per hour, yet the sleek design ensured maneuverability on par with single-prop aircraft. The Do335 V1 made its maiden flight in October of 1943, and it was followed by the pre-production A0 model in June of 1944. In September, the engine output was raised to 1,800 horsepower for the production version, the A1. Both the A0 and A1 versions had one 30mm cannon firing through the prop hub and two 20mm cannons over the engine. The fighter bomber version could carry up to 1,000 kilograms of bombs. However, the end of World War II precluded its development and entry into real combat. Looking at the instructions, in step 1 we are building the pilot seat and we're attaching that to the rear bulkhead. We're also building and detailing the instrument panel. You can see in this photo that I use an Edwards pre-painted photo etch seatbelt for the pilot seat. That really dresses up what can be seen through the cockpit canopy. Although there is a decal provided for the instrument panel, I did not use that. I found I could get a better finish just painting this and detailing it by hand. One consistent inaccuracy that I found going through this kit was the colored callouts on the interior of the kit, on the wheel wells, on the gear themselves. So I've tried to include some photos of actual aircraft to help in painting these detail parts. There's a nice pilot figure that's included with this kit if you wanted to go that route. In step 2, we're continuing construction of the cockpit. I didn't have any issues with this area of construction. In step 3, we have to make some decisions on whether we're going to pose the bomb bay open or close. If we are not posing the bomb bay open, we do not need to build the bomb. We also don't need to attach the bomb rack, and that is part C30. And we also don't need to attach parts C4, C18, or C17 to the interior of the aircraft. You definitely want to read through the instructions and take your time on this step. Even though I don't plan on using it, I did build up the bomb, and it looks to be fairly well detailed. In step 4, we're working on the port side fuselage half, and we're installing the rear radiator and the exhaust boxes on the inside of the aircraft. The fit on all these parts was excellent. In step 5, we are closing up the fuselage halves around the interior of the aircraft. One nice feature in step 5 is that Tamiya provides a nose weight to keep this aircraft kit from being a tail sitter That's a very thoughtful addition, and I really appreciate that. I didn't have any issues with this step, and the fit between the fuselage halves was excellent. In step 6, we're building the radiator for the forward engine. In this step, you can choose to pose the flaps open or closed. I chose to pose mine in the open position. In step 7, we're attaching the upper fuselage and the forward gun covers and the exhaust to the aircraft. The only item to watch out for in this step is drilling the hole for the DF loop antenna, and depending on which version you're building, that hole is in a different location. In step 8, we're just assembling the upper and lower wing halves. The fit of these parts was excellent. In step 9, we're attaching the horizontal tailplanes to the aircraft. We're also attaching the wings to the aircraft and the radiator for the forward engine. I had no issues with the tailplanes. They went on very nicely, and I was able to get a filler-free join from those to the fuselage. The forward radiator also mounted without any issues. The wings on this kit attach in a somewhat unique fashion. You push them in, and at a certain point they lock in place. I found that on my example I had a little bit of a gap on certain areas around the wing where it joins into the fuselage, and so I had to flow a good bit of liquid cement around that seam to seal the wings up properly. I was able to get a pretty much filler-free seam around the wings, but on the forward section of each wing where it attaches to the fuselage, I did have to insert a small piece of plastic card to shim a tiny gap at that spot. In step 10, we're building the main landing gear. The detail on these parts looks excellent. I think the landing gear in general on this kit is going to be very sturdy. This brings me to another somewhat prevalent issue with this kit, and that issue is the number of ejector pin marks that are found on the inside of the main gear doors. There are also quite a few of the ejector pin marks on the inside of the gear wells. It's almost impossible to clean up all of these due to the location on the inside of the parts, and so I chose to just leave them and not really deal with them. Thankfully, most of these will not be seen on the finished kit, but if you're someone who obsesses about such things, these are going to cause you a lot of headache. In step 11, we're building the front landing gear. The detail on these parts looks excellent. As I was researching the color on the gear wells and the inside of the gear doors for this aircraft, I found that the Do335 at the Smithsonian had silver painted gear wells, and the insides of the gear doors were also painted silver. And so that's what I went with. I plan on painting the landing gear legs themselves in RLM 02, and that's a light gray green. That's typical of Luftwaffe aircraft. In step 12, we're adding the nose gear. This looks to be very well engineered. We're also adding the inner gear doors, and I don't anticipate any problems with these steps. In steps 13, we're adding the main landing gear, and we're adding more of the gear doors. We're also adding the bomb bay doors in either the open or closed position. I chose to model mine in the closed position, and once I trimmed off all of the tabs, both on the lower wing and on the bomb bay doors themselves, I was able to get a very good fit all the way around these closed parts. In step 14, we're adding the air outlet ducts for the rear engine of the aircraft. We're also building the air intakes for both of the engines. In step 15, we are building the props, setting these together. These both go together very nicely. One thing I would recommend is to slice one side of the poly cap that holds the prop on. That allows it to hold it not quite so tightly, and that way I don't risk breaking a prop if I'm putting it on or taking it off. In step 16, we are adding the final parts to the aircraft. These include the air intakes, these include the clear parts and the props. Looking at the fit of the clear parts, these fit great, and with just a little bit of dry fitting, I think I'll be able to get a very precise fit on these. I plan to build mine with the canopy closed, and so I have trimmed off the two tabs that are there if you want to position it in the open position. The fit of the nose air intake was fine. However, I found that there were some pretty significant gaps around the air intake for the rear engine, and I had to flow quite a bit of the liquid cement into that gap. to kind of fill that. Looking at the color and marking guide, there are decals for 3 aircraft that are included with this kit. The colors on all the aircraft are a dark olive green and a light green over an RLM 76 light blue. I really don't like the way Tamiya does their paint callouts and has you mixing paints. I would much rather them just give the RLM colors and let me paint it accordingly. Looking at the decals themselves, these decals look to be of decent quality. They are in register, they're well printed, they are opaque, but I anticipate them being on the very thick side. Plan on using a lot of decal setting solution, and where they cross panel lines, I would suggest cutting the decals with a razor blade once they're almost completely dried to get them to settle in. Looking at the surface detail on the kit, the exterior of the parts is somewhat shiny, the engraved detailing is very fine, it's consistent, and it should look great under a coat of paint. It's not quite as extensive as the amount of engraving you would find on a more modern Edouard kit. Overall, the engineering of the kit is excellent. The fit on the major parts was excellent. I have not cleaned up the seams on the aircraft yet, but these are just going to require some very minor cleanup. In conclusion, well, when this kit originally came out in 2000, I remember it being kind of hailed as a wonder kit. It was considered by many to be a shake and bake kit. It's one that you would have a hard time messing up. For me, what keeps this from being the perfect kit is the many errors and the color callouts that I noticed during the build, and the multitude of ejector pin marks found on the inside of the gear doors and in the landing gear bays. I love that Tamiya incorporated a lot of detail in this kit without relying on a high parts count. For such a large aircraft, it has a relatively low number of parts. As I said, the engineering on it is excellent, the fit is excellent throughout, and I can highly recommend this kit for anyone looking to build their first twin-engine World War II aircraft. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you out there have built the Tamiya 1/48 scale Do335 previously, please let me know in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, model on.